Hello and welcome to Conversations in Sustainability. I'm your host for this episode, Kathy Osmond. Back in 2015, Sydney-siders might have noticed a phenomenon sweeping the curbsides and pedestrian malls of certain suburbs. Overnight, in previously barren patches of roadside, there would appear a strange little pod of timber seating raised off the street like a trailer and fringed with planter boxes filled with plants. This might all be topped with a market umbrella or in some cases include a fixed roof. On the bench seats within, you might see a group eating lunch or individuals enjoying a coffee or a book. We'd never seen anything like it. In the decades since those first sightings, this phenomenon has spread across the city and beyond. You might see it in a plaza that's in dire need of shade and greenery, in a former taxi rank on the central coast of New South Wales, outside Logan City Council in suburban Brisbane, at the curb alongside a Launceston cafe, or providing shady places to sit at Penrith Public Beach. This is called placemaking, and here to tell us about its benefits for both community and environment is my guest, Ben Perry, co-owner of Future Village. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you, Kathy.
So, Ben, your job description can be summed up as placemaker, which is a pretty cool term. Tell us about placemaking. What are the principles behind it?
Placemaking was a concept that came out of America, and it was looking at these spaces within communities that weren't being used, they were underutilised, and looking at it from a holistic approach. So at one stage, you've got the design of the space. How do you get community back into that space? How do you make the community feel safe in a space? Can they exercise? Is there free play in a space? Does it have any greenery, any shading? How well is it managed? Can entertainment or events be brought into this? There was all these sort of ideas which were being individually put in from different inputs of community or government, but it was never really holistically approached as a set of principles. So for placemaking, it's looking at a space and working out how it can be reimagined, and then what needs to go in it to activate that to be reimagined. Initially, the concept was very much about fast and furious, go drop something in really quickly, put a milk crate on the ground, let people enjoy sitting outside, throw a pot plant. What sort of evolved now is that's great, and we got people back onto the streets, but the materials that were used were very disposable and didn't have a long lifespan. Now people are starting to expect to be on the street. The economics of it is helping local businesses, that they don't want these things taken away. So I think the next stage of placemaking, which we're sort of seeing at the moment, is this sort of more durable, longer lasting, easier to maintain infrastructure, and whether that's green infrastructure or just changing the footpath materials or bringing shade or whatever that needs to be, that infrastructure needs to have a longer lifespan. And that's probably how you sort of wrap up placemaking. Okay,
so let's talk about what happens if you don't apply placemaking to particular parts of, say, a city. In your messaging, you talk about the greyscape and heat islands, which many of our listeners will have heard of. But can you describe this rather unappealing landscape for us and unpick heat islands?
Greyscapes was actually what got me really interested in this space. I grew up in a small town in central New South Wales that had no trees down the main street. It was concrete off the road, concrete along the footpath, onto a building and up. And then coming into the cities, I started to see even worse aspects of this, going, where was this architecture of the 80s and 90s and even early the 70s? How did we not design greenery into these spaces? So this whole idea of greyscapes is when you're in a built environment that is completely lacking of nature, and then the urban heat island is the effect, which is the absorption of basically the sun's rays in material that builds up over the day and then heats a place hotter. The ambient temperature becomes hotter than what it would naturally be. So one of the big problems with climate change, and especially in I'd saw the fringe suburbs of a lot of cities where you don't have a lot of greenery and you don't have a lot of airflow, is that you're getting these heat traps, which are called urban heat islands. And they can get incredibly intense. And you've got even cities in Europe, like Paris, having a mass death episode a few years ago, which has completely revolutionized how Paris is seeing itself, Barcelona as well. And for my area, Western Sydney, the economic cost of these is blowing out, where you're getting loss of local economics by people not wanting to walk around. You have health effects. Over 36 degrees, you start getting major health effects, which also have a cost to it. You start losing your infrastructure. You start having problems with just power grids overloading and other components. Then you've got the biological or biodiversity effects of plants and animals being able to survive in these heat zones. So all this accumulation gives a cost to the community, whether it's social, economic, biodiversity costs. So working out how to tamper those and bring them back down into a manageable temperature is probably the area which we sort of play in.
Okay. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up, playing in this space. What's your background and what are the origins of the Future Village?
It's really varied. I used to be embarrassed when I was younger by thinking I was a generalist, but now I'm a generalist. So I'm incredibly interested in all career paths. I'm incredibly interested in the knowledge that goes with them. And through that, I've probably had 13 or 14 different jobs over my career time. But the great thing about what I do now, it uses a bit of everything in it. So I'm a more specialist. I'm a horticulturalist and a geologist by academic side of things. But I've also been an event director. I've run a creative agency. I've been a festival owner. So there's all these sort of weird things that come together that are incredibly useful in this sort of placemaking world.
How did they all lead you to creating Future Village?
My business partner, for people that may know, the major sporting fields across Australia play between AFL or soccer to cricket. His family invented the drop-in wicket pitch, which is this concept of you go in the middle of the field and you pick up the whole centre of the field and you take it off in winter, take the winter pitch off, then you drop the cricket pitch back in summer. They've done 7 across Australia. No one else needs one of these. They're incredibly expensive, so that market was finished. Then he also invented a portable tennis court, which is really weird. The only person that needed a portable tennis court in Australia was Tennis Australia.
And is this a clay court? Or?
No, it's a grass court.
Right.
So he'd invented this way to make grass trays and bring them all together to make this portable tennis court. He happens to live 50 metres down the road and our kids started kindergarten at the same stage. When I saw what he was doing, I thought, he's got these amazing products, but a very limited market. My interest was in looking at these Greyscape, going, how could we take that really high engineered materials and green infrastructure and reimagine that to be able to place in local communities to bring greenery in. There are already green walls, so we said, how do we do it on the horizontal surface? How do we get plants to survive in hostile environments on a horizontal plane rather than the vertical plane?
Because some of your projects feature sort of swathes of natural grass, correct? Not just sort of seating, etc.
Yeah, so then it became an integration. So we'd worked out how to make the plants be able to grow and create these sort of what we call floating gardens. Then we didn't even know what placemaking was. We just worked out how to make plants grow on the horizontal surface. From that, then placemaking came about and the people were going, oh, we'd love to see this on our street. We'd love to see this on our sidewalk, but we also want seats. We also want decking because if there's people standing on the ground too long, the grass wears out. So can you make decking? Then we also need shade structures. Okay, can we make shade structures? So it was an evolution of mainly local councils going, we love what you're doing, but can you do this? And both my business partner and me we love a challenge and a design challenge. So it was just like, yeah, sure we can. We'll just go and make that. And then we've got some great engineering partners, some great architects, and we'll come together and go, right, how do we solve this problem? And one of the big ones is how do we keep it freestanding? because as soon as we go into excavation of sidewalks or pedestrian ways, you hit services, it becomes very expensive. So we then sort of looked at this niche of how do we make freestanding green infrastructure, which is sort of covers all of these areas of placemaking as well as urban greening and rewilding areas and increasing biodiversity. It's all the same sort of concept, but it's all about minimal penetration to the ground surface.
Okay. And a lot of these, well, can we call them installations?
Yeah, installations, activations, yeah.
Some of which are called parklets, which is a little noun that I love. It's perfect. Some of them are, well, many of them are in public places that over which local councils have jurisdiction. How difficult was it to start working with local government, say, hey, we're going to take up these parking spaces?
I'd never worked with local councils before in any of my careers. I'd come across them a few times, but I'd never been in that system. So it took quite a while from a business perspective to understand the dynamics of how local councils work, the process and systems, the reporting they're required. And that was quite challenging to start with. The lucky thing is with local councils is that if the bigger councils, i.e. City of Sydney or City of Melbourne, do something, then quite often the next level down wants what they've got. So there's a bit of playing of trying to get things in for cheap or trial things into these bigger councils to give us nearly the authority to go to these other smaller suburban regional councils and say, hey, look, we've done this for this council. Would you also like this in it? They have a very different way of procuring material versus the corporate side of things. You have to go through a very different system, understanding that how grants work from state governments down to federal governments, how to be able to write good grant submissions and what's required in that submissions. That acquired knowledge probably now makes us feel very comfortable working in that space, but it did take the business probably 2 years to be able to understand how to talk to governments and how to communicate to them and what are their drivers.
Okay. And what are some of your tips?
Local councils in Australia have enough money on the basis to look after all the services the community needs. So that's your rubbish collection, that's your open spaces, that's your collecting your rates, all of that. To do the next step up of doing something bigger, they require a lot from state government grants. So a lot of the projects that councils will look on is grant orientated. So for us specifically, it's following the grants. It's following the grants across all Australia, seeing what grants are coming up, and then seeing if our products or our services can fit into that, and then notifying the councils. Because what we find is that quite a few of the councils, they'll obviously all be notified by the state government, but as you move down through the silos of different councils, they may not be aware that there is a grant that is actually for their space. So we actually communicate a lot back to the councils we work with across Australia to them go, hey, this grant's come out. Can we help you? Are you interested in this? Can we give you some ideas for your submission? We know we don't get the work from that. It'll still have to go through the procurement side of things, but at least we become aware of it and hopefully generate the excitement in the council, say, hey, look, this grant's going, let's apply for that with the state government, and maybe some of our services or materials can be used to solve that problem.
Okay. Can you tell us about an interesting project in particular, one involving local government?
I think probably one of our first big projects was for Blacktown City Council, and this is a council in Western Sydney. It's a fairly low socioeconomic area, and it didn't come from the normal side of things, which is like we want to green our place or we want to increase economic development. It actually came from the safety officer, and it was about changing a space right in the city centre and trying to change the way people that are using it. When we first there, we didn't even know about urban heat island effect at that stage, but I remember going there in summer and I couldn't stand in the middle of the square. It was so hot. Wow. It was bluestone. It was probably, I'd be guessing, 50 or 60 degrees, the ambient air temperature there. And it was right beside a supermarket and people were running. They were literally running from one side across the other or doing this big loop to try and get there.
Because the surface was so hot.
The surface was so hot. that wasn't actually the problem they brought us there. It was a problem of people loitering after later on and wanting to try and change that space. And so we thought, oh, maybe our floating garden, putting these grass and trays in there might have an effect, and let's put some seating. When we did it, one, we changed the usage of it, and it's still there in its second iteration, but we had elderly sitting there, we had kids using the grass, we had the library activating and reading stories to young kids. It just created this whole community, basically created like a piazza type scenario from Europe in this space. And because it had many plants and so much nature there, it also cooled the space down a lot. We had no idea how much or why it did it, but it totally regenerated that space. And that's when we knew we were onto something. Like qualitatively, we could go, this is great.
So science is really key, isn't it, when it comes to communicating to, partners, but also customers and the general public. You did do a study with UTS 2024. Tell me about what the findings were there and the value of that study.
So that was probably even just bouncing from that last comment about the Blacktown Plaza. It was, how do we quantify that? And we knew that urban heat island was expanding. And at that stage, the New South Wales chief scientist put out some basically requests to other government departments and say, what are the biggest challenges you've got? What haven't you been able to solve? And what would you like to do? And at that stage, one of the New South Wales departments said, we have a major problem with heat island. We don't have any alternatives here at the moment that are cheap and are a rather passive way of overcoming this. We'd like to put out that challenge. So with UTS, we went, oh my goodness, we've actually solved this challenge at Blacktown, but we don't know why. Like, we have some educated guesses, but let's try and quantify this. So
you didn't know by how many degrees the temperature had dropped in those areas?
Exactly. We had no idea on the temperature change. All we could see was just judging by our own eyes that people were using this space and weren't running through it like we did before. So for 2 years, with funding from the New South Wales chief scientist, we researched greening to try and work out, basically solve two problems. How much can you cool an area? And then that was sort of the first year. The second year, then we said, wouldn't it be great to be able to work out how much of an open space you actually need to change into greening to solve this problem, to keep it below the World Health Organization's 36 degrees. If we can find that ratio, we can completely change landscaping design within Australia and probably globally about how you should design spaces. So after the first year, we worked out we could lower the temperature by sort of 10 to 12 degrees directly on the above the space we're using. But some other interesting questions came up. We used infrared cameras to look at the plants and the activation as a whole, and we noticed that some plants were actually cooler than other plants. And then we saw that we had massive heat problems in the mulch we were using. So that led to the second one, which was, let's do more science and let's go and investigate mulches, which every council, every person on their home uses on their garden, and see what works the best. And then to look at all the different let's look at 40 different plant species to see if there's some plants that work better as air conditioners than other plants. And then the last bit was, how much of a space do we need to cover? And then we just finished that research around 3-4 weeks ago.
Oh, okay, recent.
So on the findings of that, we've now found that we can cool directly above by 15, 16, 17 degrees, and that's on days above 38 degrees. We can keep the temperature to 36. The ground may get to 50 or 60 degrees. So if you're immediately surrounding these, you've got a cool island you can go to. We found that from mulches, any stone mulches or recycled concrete are incredibly bad to use because they absorb a lot of heat and then they radiate up and they can get to 50, 60 degrees Celsius. So they're actually counteracting the plants that are living in them,
right,
and also stressing the plants a lot because you're putting a lot of heat into that plant system. For the plants, it wasn't so much we found one species that was like going to be the amazing cooling species. what we found is that the more plant material you put, so ground cover, shrubs, up to larger shrubs, to even trees, the more you can fit in a square metre, the more you're going to cool a space. And I suppose the last bit of the Holy Grail was what percentage. So we think I love academics because it's like 38.9%, which is ridiculous, but it's roughly about 40% of your space needs to be greened in an open space to keep your temperatures below that 36, 37 degrees. There's spatial layouts and things like that. So our next point is, how do we communicate this to the industry? So I look at some of the new developments. So in Parramatta Square, we've got these trays in there. That was built 5 years ago. It has an urban heat-on effect. So even designs nowadays, designers or engineers or landscape or architects aren't aware of the problem, and they aren't aware of the science about how you can actually minimize that problem. So I think that's sort of our next step, is to try and get that information out to the industry to say, hey, look, we have to change our design practices when we're designing cities or spaces to include greenery or shade to try and keep these temperatures under control.
So your main audience is industry?
It's been local councils and state government. That's just been where weirdly, we're only a very small company, so we run where we can. And so since we started, it's really been that sort of government, local councils. In the last year, that's pivoting now into industry and to the corporate side of things. And that's, I think, because we now have actual quantifiable data and products we can give to them and say, if you install this, this is what it's going to do. So if you're a corporation that's going for neighbours or a green star rating on your building, you need the science behind it to say, if we install this, this is going to help get you more stars. Before that, or we could say we just have these pretty gardens. Yeah. So I suppose now we have the science behind it, and we're continuing with that research in different areas, is to be able to now go to industry and say, you can use these products and you will get this benefit out of it for your reporting or for your stakeholders that are wanting to do this. That quantifiable data is being invaluable now to move us into that sector.
The proof points are really important, aren't they?
100%. Before that, they just go, well done, guys, like you've made a floating garden.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that's nice, but yeah, we'll leave you in the council sector.
In your time working with local government, have conversations about sustainability been more welcome over time?
It's increasing. Like, it's actually getting trackability of your products, what your products are made from, where they're made, end of life, recyclability, all of these things. In every tender now, we have to pretty much justify what the material we're using, where it's come from, and what's its purpose at end of life. So we're seeing a lot more of that over the last probably couple of years. It's getting a stronger and stronger basis. We're now starting to see biodiversity come into play. It was more reducing carbon effect. Now that's adding to biodiversity. How are we going to increase local biodiversity? So all of those components are coming together, but there's a trade-off, and that's the hard bit, because the biggest problem with green infrastructure is it looks great when you put it in, but you have to maintain it. So maintenance costs, whether it's water, whether it's picking the rubbish out of the planters, whether it's regenerating the materials, all of that is the expense over the lifetime of it. So you're looking for materials that can last for as long as possible, that require the lowest maintenance, but at the same time you're trying to find materials that have a sustainability angle to them or an end-of-life angle to them as well. And that's the trade-off we're trying to work out, is what materials to use and the benefits and pros and cons of both of them.
Do you have an ongoing role in the maintenance of your infrastructure?
We do. Usually it's held for, a lot of the tenders are, you must supply maintenance for 1 year, 2 years, and then councils will take over that maintenance to certain degrees of skill level. So some councils will leave them and they'll just fall apart.
It's a reputational risk for you, isn't it?
There is a reputational risk, and that's really hard, especially once we look after something for a year or two and then it goes off and nothing gets done to it. All the plants die, everything gets damaged, no one's taking any care of it. and that's one of our projects. That's something we can't control other than trying to influence councils to make sure when they're budgeting or getting this funding, grant funding, that they speak to the open spaces team. They speak to the maintenance departments to say, are you aware that when this goes in, it's going to have a 5-10 year lifespan as a minimum, and we're going to have to maintain it. So that budget has to be put in there. We have to have that staffing, and a lot of that hasn't been discussed in previous projects.
The end of life, as you mentioned before, is an issue. And we know that there are many local councils are going to be working with the upcoming Remade in Australia program, where council procurement officers are going to be really looking at, the end of life of all of their infrastructure. So how is this going to affect you?
Yeah, I think one of the things which we've done differently in our design to a lot of other companies is we've made all our products to be a shell that you skin with different fabrics. So all of them are made out of just steel, which is a great recyclable component, and then you skin them. So you can either choose to skin it with like natural FSC certified timber. You can decide to use a composite timber. You can put aluminium on it. You can put stainless steel. You can put any material you like on it. The advantage we see of that is that if something gets damaged, you don't have to throw the whole product away. You just replace a panel. The other bit that comes into it, and I suppose the classic example is we use a composite timber now. We used to use hardwood a lot, but the maintenance upkeep for hardwood in a public space is you have to go and re-oil it at least every 6 months. So using a product like Modwood, which is a brand that comes out of Victoria, it's 45% recycled wood chip, 45% recycled soft plastics with a binder. It lasts for years without having to do anything. So it's a great recycled product, but it's end of life. You can't recycle it again, but it does overcome the maintenance problems of timber and having to keep applying and chemicals and doing all of that to it. So that's the pros and cons. It's a certified green product, but we can't do anything with it at the moment at its end of life.
Okay. So with the product that you have now, if you had a bucket list of amazing projects you'd love to do, what's on it?
The biggest ones we're working on at the moment is biosolar. That's come about from the research of the trays. Take Hamburg in Germany. It's just put policy through that by 2027, every building over 250 square metres has to have a biosolar roof. And a biosolar is basically incorporating plants with photovoltaic cells. And people go, why would you want plants with photovoltaic cells? The benefit of this is that when solar panels get above 35, 40 degree heat, their efficiency starts plummeting. So solar panels actually work the best in cold environments. So all the people putting solar panels on the top of the rooftops have a 35 degree day, those rooftops suddenly hitting 60, 70, they're radiating heat. Your solar panels are probably producing very little energy whatsoever. By putting plants underneath it, we know we can cool them by 10 to 12 degrees, so we can keep them in their efficiency range. And there's some research done by UTS which showed that over an entire day, night, over 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, you can get an efficiency of about 4 degrees across the entire panels. And on really hot days, it's up to 100 degree plus more efficiency. We've done the research on the trays showing that we can have this cooling effect. So it's a no-brainer. We know how much we can cool it. How about we can incorporate solar panels to it and have it as a freestanding modular that can retrofit onto roofs. So because rooftop greening, the problems with that are people go, how do I keep the plants alive? What happens if there's a leak? And how do I access surfaces? By the tray system we have, you just pick them up with a pallet jack and move them. So you don't have to worry about drilling into your rooftop to put your solar panels. Everything is freestanding.
What about the water? How do you keep the plants alive?
So what we use is wicking systems, and wicking's been around for thousands of years. The Greeks used to do it. They'd get a clay bottle, fill it full of water, put it around their olive tree or their fruit tree, and then the clay would slowly leak out or wick the water into the surrounding soil with it. There's only 2 companies in the world, and one, Waterups, who we partner really closely with, that have commercialised wicking. That's us and them, and that's globally. So the whole premises is you just have a reservoir, and then you have a material like a sock that goes into the water and pulls the water up into the soil layer. That means the plants use the water when they need to. They've always got access to water. You're not top watering, so you're not losing any water from evaporation. So the top's actually really dry and it gets wetter as you go. So from a maintenance perspective, this totally changes how open spaces provide maintenance. There's not just like you do a normal pot where you water in the top and the water runs out through the bottom and you might have a tray underneath to collect it. So on the biosolar, the other benefit this is rainwater detention and retention, which is another big industry or government's changing the way we think about stormwater runoff, and legislation is coming in. And if you have to build it here in Sydney, you have to go to Sydney Water and tell them how you're going to detain and retain your rainwater. Our trays can do that. So as well as the benefits of the biodiversity or cooling your photovoltaics or the thermal insulation of the trays on top, we already know that they run at about the same as your bat system you put in. It provides more insulation on your roof than that, so you get energy savings with that. You also now can retain and detain your rainwater to get through that side of things as well. So we see it as like a Swiss Army knife of rooftop garden that we hopefully people start to roll out or retrofit the concrete roofs.
So it sounds like this will be engaging Future Village and your team for the next little while.
It's one of our crazy ideas that we're going through. We've just received funding from the federal government to investigate this further. So they see it as one of another core area with the energy transition about how we can help across multiple different ways, and this is just one possible way of doing it. So for us, we see there's a really big possibility of bringing biodiversities back into cities, cooling them, but at the same time, those economic drivers of, can I generate more electricity? Can I keep my neighbours, which star rating for commercial or industrial buildings, which is the higher the rating, more attractive it is by your rainwater detention, your biodiversity increase, using your air conditioners and heating less in winter because you've got great insulation in your roof. So we see those drivers as well as being in it, and hopefully industry sees that as well and starts to pick it up.
Indeed. Ben, thank you so much for a really interesting conversation. I look forward to having a little roof garden and under my solar panel on my roof one day.
No, thank you very much, Kathy.
You've been listening to Conversations in Sustainability, a podcast by the Green Horizon team. We're specialists in sustainability communications, from the circular economy to the energy transition and food waste to electric vehicles. We live and breathe these issues day in, day out. To check out our work and hear from some of our clients, head to greenhorizon.au.